Let's talk about frustration. I am not one of those people who remains calm all the time and does not experience frustration. Particularly when I'm working with computer, those little greyed out boxes in software, they drive me up the wall. Frustration can make you quit. It is that voice in the back of your head telling you that you're not good enough, that this is going to take far too much time, that you just don't have what it takes to learn this skill. And frustration occurs right in that dip in the learning curve. It's that trough where your motivation is at its lowest and you're still not reaping the benefits of developing a skill yet. And this is probably the most likely time for you to feel like quitting. However, if we can push through this dip in the learning curve, we can get to the point where we reap the investment that we have got, the benefits of the practice that we have placed into this time, and really can start enjoying all the time that we have put into learning this skill. And that's what this lesson is about, pushing through that dip in the learning curve in order to maximize our return on investment of practice. The first thing that I find useful is to just acknowledge that you're in the dip. This happens. This is always going to happen. There's always going to be a lull after the initial burst of excitement of the novelty of learning something new. You're in the dip. This is the worst time for you in your learning progression, and it eases my anxiety to know that this is as bad as it's going to get. So what we want to do is minimize that time spent in the dip. We have a tolerance for poor results, so we don't want to exceed that. We want to push through as quickly as possible. So here's some strategies that I use that quicken up the process of moving through the dip. During times of frustration, deliberate, scheduled practice is key. This is when you need to be really regimented, really disciplined, stick it in the diary, get out of bed early and get on it as quickly as you can. During this period of time, you probably don't want to practice, but practice is the only thing that's going to push you through this learning curve. So you need to really stick to your guns here and have a bit more discipline than you would normally have. If we can really put into action the practice smart techniques we covered in the previous lesson, this will also help quicken up that time. We want to be as efficient with our practice as possible, especially during the dip. In the previous lesson, we talked about fun practice versus deliberate practice, and if we can just move the slider over slightly more towards fun practice just to boost our morale a little bit during this difficult time, that will also help. Using shorter practice sessions so that quitting before the frustration really sets in helps keep my motivation levels and morale high. If it's a physical skill or one that you're using muscles that you haven't used before, then taking a couple of days off can help boost your the healing process of those muscles. And when you come back, you'll find that you might have actually already pushed through the frustration that you've had. When I was learning how to manual a bike, I was using muscles that I hadn't used before really properly. And I found that I was at a point where I just wasn't getting any further. There was a fatigue in my legs that meant that I couldn't manual the bike any further than I was getting. And I was just really stuck. And there was this bottleneck in my practice regime. So what I did was I just took a couple of days off. And I found that when I came back, without doing anything at all except resting, I had increased the distance that I could manual. My muscles just needed a little break. I like to think of this as weathering the storm until it is over, enduring the hard times in anticipation of better times. This really helps me push through this. Another thing I like to do when I'm experiencing frustration is to split the skill up even further into its component parts. Little successes can be overshadowed by an overwhelming failure in the ability to do something. But if you split it up into component parts, it's easier to see certain successes or progress in certain areas of what you're trying to do. When I was learning to play violin, there was 100 different things going on in my head, and they were all going wrong, which made the violin sound like a drowned cat. It sounded terrible. However, when I broke the skill up into component parts and had much more focused practicing, for example, just practicing one note, drawing the bow back and forward, I found that I could make progress with my bowing technique, even though my left hand technique was a bit of a mess. And seeing progress was really what pushed me through the dip in the learning curve here. So we've covered that the dip is something to be anticipated, something that is definitely going to happen to you no matter what skill you choose to learn. There's going to be a lull in the learning curve. Expect it, weather the storm. There's some techniques that you can put into place immediately as soon as you start feeling frustration that can help alleviate the feeling and reduce your likelihood to quit. By being more deliberate and disciplined with our practice, as well as employing our smart practice techniques, we can hopefully reduce how much frustration or how much time we spend in the dip. Shorter practice sessions during this time, along with it splitting the skill up into its component parts, can also help alleviate symptoms of frustration. So next time you experience that lull, and you definitely will, anticipate it, try to understand what's going on, try to understand that you are in the middle, not the end of your learning progress, and try to put in as many of these actionable points into your practice as you can to try and compress that period of frustration down to a minimum. In the next video, we're going to talk about something that is much more welcome, and that is success. So I'll see you there.